Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Hafiz Nur Imran bin Biran. Matrix number is 09DKM18F1082. So today I will present about the clutches and brakes. For the first one, principle of clutches and brakes. For the clutch, a device that permits the smooth, gradual connection of two shafts rotating at different speeds. And for the brakes, enables the controlled dissipation of energy to slow down, stop, or control the speed of a system. The next one, before we go to the function of clutch and brake, I will explain that the clutch and brakes are widely used to transfer rotary motion from one shaft to another, and the clutches typically transfer torque via inline or parallel shaft. For the brakes, transfer torque from a rotating shaft to a motor flange or other object permanently affixed in a stationary position to stop or hold the shaft. Alright, let's we go to the next function of clutch and brake. An effective device for the control and transmission of torque and speed in many rotating drive systems. The second one, to transfer torque from an input shaft to an output shaft by clutching. And the last one, to stop and hold a load by braking.
Okay, I'm from Group 4. Title is Crush and Bread. My name is Kelvin Fan, Noble Metric 09DKN Acting F1074. Okay, now I would like to talk about various types of crush. Mechanical crushes can be actuated manually or by foot. Hand operation of mechanical crushes involve actuation directly with a cam or lever, or in larger equipment to compound linkage. Okay, next is electric crushers, also known as electromagnetic crushers, operate a crush engagement system electrically but rely on mechanical system to transmit torque. When the crush is actuated, current flow to an electromagnet producing a magnetic field. Lastly is hydraulic crush. Field is used to convey force just like in hydraulic brake, except instead of a caliper at the other end of the hose, there is a slab cylinder that add on the crush pressure plate in the same manner that a cable does. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. My name is Haikal, and today I'm going to be explaining practical assemble and disassemble of clutch and brake. First is clutch. This first step is disconnect the drive line from the transmission. Second step is disconnect the clutch actuation, gear selector linkage, and electrical connection from the transmission. The third step is to separate or remove the transmission from the engine. The fourth step is to remove the throw-out bearing from the transmission. It's usually on a collar attached to a fork inside the transmission bell housing. Check fork and collar and bearing or output shaft sleeve for excessive wear. The fifth step is to remove the bolts that hold the pressure plate to the engine flywheel. This will release the clutch disc as well. The sixth step is to remove the bolts holding the flywheel to the engine crank. Best practice is to have the flywheel clutch surface machine to create a clean and flat surface for the new clutch disc. The seventh step is to check and replace, if needed, the pilot bearing or bushing for the engine crank. The eighth step is to install the flywheel, tighten to factory torque specs. Practice is to use a thread locker on a flywheel bolts. The ninth step is to slide a clutch alignment tool through the clutch disc splatter or the bolt pilot bearing bushing, and while holding the pressure plate, reinstall the bolts and tight. Best practice is to install pressure plate bolts with new ones. The 10th step is, once all the pressure plates bolts are in place, adjust the clutch disc to get centered. When centered, tighten bolts to factory specs. The 11th step is to throw out bearing onto fork or collar assembly. The 12th step is to reinstall and install again the transmission and tighten to factory specs. If you didn't line up the clutch disc well, then this will be difficult. Try to have the transmission in gear so that the drive output can be turned to adjust the input shaft splines to the clutch disc. The 13th step is to install the clutch actuator. Best practice to replace hydraulic components at this time on the cylinder, or at least inspect for excessive wear. Note that any new clutch actuator components may need to be adjusted and or air bled. For this step is to reconnect any electrical connections, gears, select the linkage, and drive line. The next is I'm going to be talking about brakes. In the first step is inappropriate service information research and search the procedure for assembling the brake assembly. Manufacturers may use drum brake configuration. These are the following steps in general in nature should be substituted for manufacturer's procedure. So first is clean the brake shoes, hardware and backing plates using equipment and procedures for dealing with asbestos and or dust. Second is to assemble a non-servo brake. First, remove the hold down springs, retainers and pins. Next is spread the shoes apart and remove the parking brake strut and self-adjuster components. The fifth step is to remove the retain springs. The sixth step is to assemble the parking brake lever from the brake shoe and hardware from the backing plate. Being careful not to lose any parts and remembering how they go back together. The seventh step is to clean and inspect all parts according to the manufacturer's procedure. The eighth step is to reassemble a non-servo brake. First, assemble and self-adjust the parking brake strut assembly. Loop the plate pads. The ninth step is to place one shoe on the backing plate and install the hold-down spring and pin. The 10th step is to place the self-adjuster or parking brake strut on the installed brake shoe. The 11th step is to place the retracting springs on both sides and fit the loose shoe to the backing plate. Being sure to line up with cylinder push rods, the self-adjuster and the parking brake mechanism. The 12th step is to install the hold-down spring and pin. Lastly, the last step is check the fit of all springs, clips and levers.
Assalamualaikum and good day to you, sir. My name is Syazwan Aiman bin Fairul Azhar. My matrix number is 09DKN18F1086 and I'm going to talk about how to develop clutch and brake maintenance procedure. As you can see in the slide, this is the reason why we need to develop clutch and brake maintenance procedure. And the reason is first, improper adjustment of clutch or brake. Second, oil or contaminant on friction surface. Third, worn out friction components. Fourth, worn linkage or parts used in engaging clutch or brake. 5, too much torque. And 6, high frequency cycling or high inertia loads. And for this slide, I'm going to show you the step to do the maintenance. For improper adjustment of clutch or brake, we need to follow the manufacturer's adjustment procedures. For oil or contaminant on friction surface, we need to clean or replace the surface. Next is worn out friction components. We need to check the components to see if they are within tolerance or we can replace them if necessary. For worn out linkage or parts used in engaging clutch or brake, what we need to do is to check for obstruction and corrosion on moving parts, or we can clean or replace the parts as necessary. And for too much torque, because of poor initial selection of a clutch or brake, the reason and the procedure is the clutch or brake should be replaced with one designed for the increased torque loads required. And finally, for high frequency cycling or high inertia loads, we need to change to a clutch or brake with a greater heat dissipation ability, or we can shortening the sleeping time during start up can also reduce the heat. Thank you.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nama saya Mashitah binti Muhammad Azari, 09 di KM18F 1090. Okay, ini checklist untuk clutch and brakes maintenance system yang kita boleh gunakan kalau kita nak lakukan satu maintenance terhadap clutch and brake yang ada dekat dalam satu mesin. Okay, next, the observation for preventing maintenance. Okay, firstly, the clutch or brake may not be fully engaging, so we must to follow the manufacturer's adjustment procedure to avoid the unnecessary things happen. Okay. Next, we need to clean or replace the surfaces of the friction surface. Okay. Third, we must to check the component of the friction components to see if they are within tolerance or we need to replace them if necessary, based on the situation. Okay. Number 4. Sometimes adjustment in engaging clutch or brake is adequate to compensate for wear. So we need to check for obstruction and corrosion of moving parts. That's the important things. Okay. We need to clean or replace the parts as necessary. And then we need to check the lubrication and re-lubricate if required, based on the situation that happened on the clutch and brake on the machine. Okay. 5. Too much torque is maybe because an increased load exceeds design capacity or because of poor initial selection of a clutch or brake. So we need to check the machine to determine if the increased load is temporary or permanent. Repairing or servicing a machine may reduce torque to acceptable level. If not, the clutch or brake should be replaced with one designed for the increased torque loads required. Okay, lastly, the high initial loads of excessive heat can be solved only by changing to a clutch or brake with greater heat dissipation ability. Sometimes, a fan or blower may be used to increase airflow, thus cooling equipment. So, shortening the sleeping time during startup can also reduce heat. So, less slippage means less heat, but make sure the engagement is not so sudden that severe shock loads are created in a machine. So engaging clutch under the lightest possible startup loads is always recommended. Thank you.